best expo I've ever seen. Like, it is the most amazing expo. Like, it just has the best vibe. So
the energy here is unreal.
The energy here is unreal. And Kim, I mean, you're a seasoned vet. You've been to lots of marathons, you've been to lots of races. This is the best expo you've ever seen.
I've literally done like Tokyo. I've done every big marathon. This is the coolest expo, like by far.
Interesting. Cool. Well, I really wanted to first say thank you guys for doing this today. And thank you, Boulderthon, and everybody here and the team for making this possible and making this happen. You guys freaking rock. You guys freaking crush it. So, creating content, working with brands, coaching, like moms are super women. Like my mom's right there. Shout out to her. But I'm just curious, like what made you want to pick up the camera and start filming?
So it wasn't called content creation when I started because it was so long ago. But back then people were blogging and I was like, I love this. Like, I love like the idea of like storytelling about your running. And that's really what it was back in the day, is like just sharing about your running, documenting it. And it was a lot of like writing. So I started a blog then. And then I popped over to Instagram and just put it with some pictures. And then obviously, it's more, and it's a lot more video now. And I like love that because it's so much more fun and interactive. And I feel like you get to connect better, like you can show like who you are better than just the photo.
Now, what was your kind of progression like as with all that too?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, you have a bigger following than Caitlyn and I do combined.
No.
You've just been absolutely crushing it. And I admire the consistency. And, I do think that is the key to everything. It's the key in running. It's the key in content creation. It's the key in everything. But like, how have you been able to, balance everything that you've been able to do, like in this crazy season of life, and still be able to, train to run fast? And you got obviously the half tomorrow and then New York coming up soon.
So, I mean, my little sister, she has an amazing Instagram and with a ton of followers. It's called Sign with Heart. And she was like, you should do this. Like, you would love it. It would just be like totally up your alley. So she really was like, start an Instagram, like do this, start a blog. And so I blogged for a year, like where I was doing these long blogs. I was doing them every day. It took like a ton of time. It's because your photos, it's a lot of text. And then my sister was like, you should get your Instagram to like feed into your blog. And so I was like, okay, I'll just do that to help out with that. And then obviously like it's hard with a blog to bring people to the party, but with Instagram, everybody's already at the party and you're joining their party. And so that made it just a lot. I just ditched blog after a year. I was like, this is taking too much of my time. And I don't know how many years that is, but it's been a bunch of years. So I'm so like used to it that it's just part of my routine, and I enjoy doing it. I like, you run into so many amazing people. Like I've met so many of my best friends from this, it's like, it's brought just so much good stuff to my life, that it's just a part of my life. It's not like I just know that I'm going to post that day. It just happens. Just like you said, like brushing your teeth. It's just a part of your life.
I think too, like in some ways it's like when you post, it used to kind of be like, oh, I'll just post when I feel like it. But again, kind of like Kim was saying, it's kind of our job in many ways. So I think in that sense, it's kind of an obligation where it's like, well, this is my job. This is what I do. And this is my life. So
yeah, one thing that has been like helpful for me too is just like a training plan for running. Like you're not just gonna, I just feel like going and doing 11 miles today. Yeah. And then, I feel like I'll just go run some 400s and then some 800s at the track. Like if you do that, if you're just so random with it, you're not ever gonna make the progress that you want to. And if you have the worst plan followed like consistently is better than the best plan followed not consistently, right? So for me, what's been really helpful, and I'd love to hear your guys, take on this, is I look at content and like you have to build like a plan and a system around that too. It's like I'm sitting there on Notion with like my content calendar and planning everything out. And that for me is like as a pretty unorganized, like just fly by the seat of my pants person, like having that has allowed me to make the progress that I wanted to. Just like running, I was going out and doing it and I kept getting hurt and I wasn't making the progress that I wanted to. So I got a coach and I was like, oh, this is how you structure a training plan and this is how you progress. And all of a sudden, like you see yourself, getting better at it. So what has that experience been like, for you guys both in running and as creators, like just formulating a process? Because Kayla, I know you have your clothing company and you're coaching and working with friends, and Kim, you have all the other things that you're doing as well. I have a bunch of stuff that I'm doing. Like it's you don't think we have all the time. Like, it's no, like content creation is in support of like a lot of the other things that we do in life. So I would love to just kind of hear more about like the process and like the day to day of what it looks like to be like an athlete, a business owner, a creator, a mom, like all the things that you guys do.
Well, you're more organized than I am by far. I mean, your content creation, like having Notion and you like planning it out is like incredible. I am like fly by the seat of my pants, always chasing the bus, no idea what I'm going to post until I literally sit down, like post it. Like, I don't even know.
Hey, as long as it goes out there.
Yeah. So I'm definitely like much less organized, but I also like, my life is like total chaos. So I'm just hanging on.
Oh, you're doing a good job.
Yeah, you're doing great. What about you?
I think for me, I try to have some sort of like consistency with my posting schedule. I'm not as organized as you. I don't write it out, but like I think for me, like every Monday, I post my weekly mileage from the previous week, especially when I'm race training. And I've kind of like gotten into a routine where I think like my followers expect like on Sunday she's going to post her long run, on Monday she's going to post her mileage, and then I obviously like to, whenever I post any content, I like to think like, okay, what value am I providing to people? That's like always my big thing. And then, hints of my company and kind of like my lifestyle mixed within like the week, just to kind of show like, okay, I'm not just an athlete. I own a business. I do this and that. So kind of just showing like different types and aspects of your life. But I feel like for me, it's kind of like, it is like consistent weekly schedule. I don't exactly maybe know what I'm going to post every single day. But it has some sort of like routine.
What about on the running side of things? So can you share how you got into it? How did you get into running after, playing softball? Because I played baseball too for a while. And it's like, you have to run pole to pole. And that is like, that
don't do any running in softball. I know it's really weird, honestly, but when I was in college, I really never ran that much. Like I would run on my own. It was always something I liked to do, but I was never like competitive. I never competed. And then my senior year, I just like decided, I was like, I'm just going to sign up for a half marathon. And I did. I loved it. I loved the training. And I did pretty well in the half. And then it was actually my roommate at the time. She was like, you should really do indoor track. I was like, I don't know if I want to be a 2-sport athlete because obviously softball is in the spring. But she was like, no, like I think you do great, blah, blah. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to do it. It's my senior year, might as well. So I did indoor track, and that kind of like really sparked my passion for running. I had a really good season. I was able to like advance, go to regionals and stuff, which was really cool. And then after I graduated from college, that's when I was like, okay, this is like the time in my life where if I want to do a marathon, like that had always kind of been like in the back of my head, like, okay, I did a half. I wonder if I could do a marathon. And that's kind of what sparked marathon training and all that. And then the rest is history. Now I'm just doing it all the time.
You're just doing it all the time.
Yeah.
So one thing I've been really interested in for me, like, I ran for like a year before this whole thing happened with my heart. And I was like, I felt really beat up.
Yeah.
Like I felt like the running was just beating me up. Like I was tired, I was sore, I was always hungry, like I was had all this inflammation. And then I see these people who are just running all the time. And like, your husband, who's an absolute beast, and he was telling me he ran 26 weeks in a row without taking a day off, 100-mile weeks. I was like I was running like 50-mile weeks and still taking like a day off, and like I was so beat up. So what do you guys think are like the keys to longevity in the sport?
Personally, I think it's all about balance. I'm a huge advocate for hybrid training. So, I'm never going to be someone who's running 100-mile weeks. Like, I'm just not. And I'll probably never be someone who's running upwards of 80-mile weeks. I think what's most important is to do what works best for you. And I think with the amount of lifting that I do, I can't be running that much for me to feel physically okay. And if I do, I'll feel like how you're talking about, totally drained. And I just won't be progressing. So I think in many ways it's finding what works for you. For some people, high mileage works really well for them. And other people, low mileage is really where they thrive. So I think at the end of the day, it's very individualized, but you have to kind of find that happy medium of like that sweet spot where it's like, okay, I'm I'm actually building my aerobic fitness. I'm getting better versus I'm just like completely tearing myself apart and I'm making no progress.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's finding how your body's able to like ride during it, because that's the whole thing is that people think marathon training is just supposed to be this masochistic thing. And if that's the way you view it, then you're probably beating your body down without giving it the chance to recover and then turn that work into progress. People are just doing too much work, but it's not being balanced with the right rest to turn into progress. So I just think it's like, I mean, I love having rest days. I love doing my easy runs, mega easy. But then I also think it's so important to do super high quality work. If you're not doing that high quality work, you're not going to make the progress. But if you don't balance that with the rest, you'll never see the progress either. So it's just like making sure that all those things are like in the right ratio so that you're making progress. And during training, you should feel like when you're going to do your workouts that you can do them. Like if you're going into workouts and you're just kind of flailing for each workout or just you're not hitting like the efforts and paces you should be able to hit, that's like a red flag. You have to pull back and figure out how to balance things, pull back the mileage or pull back, add an extra rest day, but you should be able to thrive in your training and not be so beat up that like you're just literally staggering to the start line. Like that's not how you want to be. You want to, like we have people who do our training programs who at the end are like if they're about to do a marathon, they're like, I don't know. I feel like the best I felt. And I'm kind of concerned about that. Like they're like worried. And then they come back, they're like, oh, I just ran like a 30-minute PR. And like, because you're not supposed to be so beat up that when you go to the start line, you're just ready to fall asleep there instead of run a marathon, and it's just like, I think we had this concept of how marathon training should feel for so long that we like forget that like you should feel good too. Like you're about to do 26 miles. You should feel ready to do 26 miles and do it well,
Yeah, it's funny. One of my clients, she was saying how like I actually like convinced her. I was like, I think you could do a marathon. Like I do think you could train. It was one of her long-term goals that she had talked about. And I was like, I think you could absolutely do it. She had just done a half. And she was like, I think just like the stigma around marathon training. She was like, I just don't think my body can handle it, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, we will get you there. Like we will build up your mileage. And so she actually just completed the marathon. And like, she was saying how she didn't realize that how good she would actually feel throughout her training block. It wasn't like, oh my God, I'm so like fatigued and this and that. You don't have to feel fatigued every single day and every single week, and you shouldn't. So I think it's really just all about how you approach it.
Kim, I'm really interested too. You were telling me that so your first marathon was like what, a 6:08, and then you got all the way down to a 3:11.
Yeah.
So you cut your time in half essentially. What were a few of the things that you implemented from after running the 6:08 that got you down to literally almost sounds so crazy to say, take 3 hours off of your marathon time?
It really was for me. Well, I like floundered for a lot of years in there, right? Like I didn't go from 6:08 to 3:11. My next one, I floundered for years because I overdid it. I did 80-mile weeks many times and 70-mile weeks. I did 70-mile weeks my first year of running, which is insane. To go from non-athlete to 70-mile weeks is like asking for trouble. And like I floundered for so many years until like I just realized you're trying to run these fast times. You can barely hit 1 mile at like your goal marathon pace. You're not really that fast. So you probably should just work on your speed for a while. So for me, I just dedicated like 8 months to speed, just to speed work, nothing over 1 mile. Like all my intervals were 1 mile and under. Like I didn't do a single thing longer than a mile. So I wasn't doing tempos. I was doing just like intense short speed work. And then I went to my next marathon. So the marathon before that, I ran a 3:39. Then the next marathon was 3:11. So like I just cut a huge chunk of time off because I got myself a lot faster and stronger.
How do you guys approach nutrition? I think this is a really hot topic. Both gave you a little smirk there. It's definitely a controversial topic, but I think it is an important one. And for me, I've done 2 marathons and I've done an ultra. And one, my nutrition was a lot more. Ironically, the first one I did with my nutrition was way more dialed in than the second one. In the second one, I got a little cocky, and it was a lot hotter than I expected, and I didn't train for that. I didn't prep for that. And then for the ultra, I was just eating a lot throughout the day. So that's just a completely different thing. But especially when you're trying to go fast, that you have to be efficient. And if your gut is all messed up, then you're not going to be able to run your best. So when it comes to nutrition, what's your guys' approach to kind of optimize performance, but then also recovery?
I mean, I think for me, number one, you have to find the foods that I think work well with you. Like for me, I'm lactose intolerant, so I don't eat dairy, things like that. But that doesn't mean that someone can't eat dairy and run a great marathon. So of course, I think it's very individualized. I think when it comes to like training for a marathon, I like to stick to the same things that I'm eating. I just eat more of those things because you're training more and you're more hungry. Obviously raising up your carbs and stuff. But I think for me, it always kind of started very like intuitively with my eating, and it's always kind of been that way. And I think it's something that personally has worked out really well for me. I've never felt like, oh, I'm under fueling or I'm not eating the right things. I've always felt like I've come into race day feeling great, carved up and ready to go. So for me, it's always been a very like intuitive approach.
Yeah, I feel the same way. And I just try to focus on whole foods, just like the quality of the nutrients I'm getting. I feel like, Dom, you're like right there with me. We just ate at Wild Pastures twice in a row.
Twice. It's so funny. I was literally getting back to the hotel and you're like, oh, we're going to Wild Pastures. It's like, just got back from there. day two.
I'm about to be like an ambassador for that. Yeah. So good. I mean, just like high quality food, good ingredients, and just like, like I'll do things like a tablespoon of Celtic salt in the morning, like just making sure I'm getting in my electrolytes and minerals and things like that. And just trying to get the good stuff in instead of, it's easy to do marathon training with just a lot of bad processed foods, And so just, I think the quality of what you put in is really important if you want the right output.
So I mentioned my mom's out here in the crowd. We used to do this thing at dinner when I was a kid. And she would say, like, what's your high part and what's your low part of the day? You have to think of like what your high part of the day was and good and then a low part. And so I'm curious, what are both of you guys, what are your high and low parts of running, like in your career? Like what is like your cream to the crop thing you're most proud of? And then another thing where you can kind of just look back and laugh about, or, what you could take back.
God, I think my high would be the Boston Marathon this year. That was huge for me. It was like a huge milestone. I really wanted to break 3 hours, and like I just had my heart completely set on that. I did it with 4 seconds to spare, so yeah, that was great.
How about it?
I'd say my low, I think just more like when I started running, I feel like I kind of did it for the wrong reasons. I was just like, I had no structure. I was like, oh, this will make me look better, blah, blah, blah. But I think once you start truly like endurance training, it's like, wow, this is what my body is doing for me. Like I just went out and ran this 20-mile run and my body like held up this entire time for me. So I think just kind of like the mindset shift of like really, running and training to fuel yourself and to perform at your absolute best. So those are mine.
So my low point was Boston. Which I love. It's Boston. So my low point was Boston. I didn't know what I was doing at that point, and I was just such a new runner. I think I'd only been a runner for 2 years. I was so excited and like just so zealous, right? And I like overdid it. I did 80-mile weeks, and I'm like, this is going to like I'm gonna have the best race ever, And then I got out to Boston, and I don't think I hit goal pace like for even a mile downhill. Like it was just the most miserable experience. I was so overtrained, but I was too new to running to even know what overtraining was. So I was like, what's going on? Like, what is happening? It just was totally confusing. I finished that race feeling like a total failure. I was so embarrassed. I had been blogging at that point, and I like did a whole blog post. Like it probably took you 20 minutes to read, and you couldn't find my time in there at all. So I was so ashamed. I was just like, and it wasn't a time for anybody to be ashamed of, but I just was so wrapped up in my running. I identified with it. So anyways, that was a real low point for me because I didn't understand how to train, and I was too it was my identity. My high point was my my run at CIM. I did 3:11, but it was more that after years of struggle, that was 2017, and in 2015 is when I ran Boston. So I struggled for 2 years, and I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know how to get better, and I just like really wanted to get better. And like CIM was like redemption. Like it was like I figured it out. I enjoyed running again. I felt so joyful the whole race. And like some random guy found me at multiple points of the race and kept taking professional photos of me, like not a photographer at the race. Because he was like, you're just smiling at everyone. And just like, and I have these amazing photos because I was so happy the whole race. And it was like, I finally figured it out. And I figured out like how to like running again. And it was like so big.
I think one thing that a lot of people, they get in their own heads, because I've been there myself too, a couple, like the taper is really hard mentally. And then even leading up to a race, like I'm sure there are people out here who are going to trying to set a PR this weekend, or people who are trying to set a PR in the coming weeks, coming months or whatnot. What strategies do you guys have that people can implement to really just feel more confident leading up to the race and not get so much in their heads? Because there's so many things like, is my fueling strategy on point? Is my hydration strategy going to be there? Oh, like my wearable told me that I didn't get, a 95% sleep or, optimal recovery. So what are a few of those things that you guys would give advice to people to really just feel confident when they toe the line?
Yeah, I mean, I think, tapering can always get in your head. I think too, just when you even see other like IG creators and you're like, oh my God, this is what they did. And am I doing something wrong? But I always like to remind myself, one, stay in your own lane. Like this is your training. This is what works best for me. And I need to trust that. And I also think it's important to understand that you just train for X amount of months. Like that's the training. The taper, that's like the easy part, right? It's what you did before that. It's what you did. It's how you practice your fueling during your training. It's what you practice on your long runs. Did you practice, everything that you're going to do on marathon day? Like, are you prepped during those months? And then the taper, that's the easy part physically. It's just more mentally like, okay, now it's just like, I got to get ready for race day. I got to mentally prepare myself for race day. But I always like to remind myself, like, the work is done. Now it's just time to relax and get ready.
Yeah, I would just say, make sure you're not like, you're taking down the volume and the intensity. And so it's easy to be like, wow, I feel really good on these easy runs, or I feel good for this speed workout. But like, you still have to hold back. Like you have to keep yourself back because you're supposed to be like, replenishing stores so you can run fast. So just making sure you don't overdo it on easy runs. And also for your speed workouts during taper, they should be really short, but like, don't overdo it. Like you're not proving anything in taper. You're just keeping the legs sharp. So like, don't go all out. Don't race things during taper.
What is one race that is on your bucket list?
It's so fun. It's so iconic. But yeah, I'd like to expand my marathon racing that I did.
I feel like I'm doing it in New York next month. My husband Tyler told me that it was like his favorite race ever. We've run races all over the world. And so, when I had the opportunity to run New York, I was like, well, looks like I have to get into shape. So I'm like getting into shape because it's like such an iconic race.
Yeah, Karen, I have a question for you too. We were talking yesterday about how you have taken like 19 months off in the past
Years
or something like that?
Yeah.
So taking 19 months off running over the past 2 years, and I mean, not many people would have noticed because you're still just dishing out just epic content and providing so much value to people. What was that? Was that hard for you? Like, kind of tying your identity to being a runner, a running creator?
It was really hard in the beginning, not even about being a running creator, but because I love running so much. Like, it's like, it was an unbalanced relationship though. It had really reached a toxic point. And I had to take it off for my health, like to get my health back. And it was a really hard decision. I kept trying to run through it. And a friend was like, you just need to stop. Like, you have to completely stop and let your body feel. I had hypothyroid and Epstein-Barr. So I was trying to run through it and it just wasn't working. And I had to be okay with stopping and not having that and seeing everybody else gain more fitness while I was completely rested and being your body is number one. And now I have such a mature, seasoned view on running because I've had to go through so many challenges, So for me, if I take a month off, it doesn't bother me because I know I can get it back. That's the other thing too, is I'm not afraid of losing fitness because I know I can gain it back, And I just see people who freak out about taking one rest day when they have of fractures, something like that. I'm like, you need to be taking much more time off. You need to be like confident in your running. And that's really what it was like having confidence for my future, that I know that I'm like, everything's not lost just because I stop now. It just is what my body needs today. But it's all like everything I want is still going to happen. It's just going to happen a little bit later.
Yeah, so both of you guys, having dealt with minor or major injuries at all, what's a way that you guys kind of got through that and kept a strong mindset, get positive, and then ultimately eased your way back into it?
I'm going to be honest. I really, as a runner, and being able to run through these races and feel great, and not have many injuries. But I mean, if I could give a piece of advice, I would say really prioritize strength training. And like Kim was saying, like, it's not, if you take one rest day, like, that's not going to ruin you. And I think it's so important. Like, so many people, they think like, oh, I just have to run more miles. It's like, well, what if you replace that easy run with a strength training session, And I think it's a different way of looking at it. And I think a lot of people like aren't willing to accept it. It's like, well, if I don't run, I'm not going to get better. So it's just, I don't know. It's a mindset shift.
How about you, Kim?
The injury?
Just injuries, like,
yeah.
Especially that time period, like, you mentioned like how you were able to kind of just be in that and be okay with it. But like when you started, like, okay, I'm ready to get back into running, like, how did you ease your way back into it? Because I feel like for me, every time I had like a minor injury, it just kept nagging along because I would start to feel a little better and I would just get back to hammering way too quick.
I mean, I've had a really interesting last 5 years because I also in that time got pregnant. I had a baby. I took a lot of time off postpartum. So honestly, like, I'm like getting back into it like right now. Like, we are like in my 5 weeks of me getting back into running. But, I really do think that like having a mindset of abundance and knowing that whatever you want is going to come for you helps you to just have like a more relaxed view of running. Like, I can start running off of my 20-mile months goal for the month and be like, I mean, why don't I just shoot for a BQ? I mean, if I don't get it, who cares? Like, it doesn't matter, but like if I train for it, it makes me excited. And that gives me like some extra motivation. I don't lose anything. If I don't hit it, I'm still probably better off than I started because I'm probably working harder to try to hit it. So
going back to the strength training piece, Caitlyn, I agree that it is super important, but I think there's a few things. One, people can overdo it. Two, runners will go in there and think that, I'm an endurance athlete, so I need to like lift for endurance in the gym. So they're lifting like 15, 20, 25, 30 reps, which is not actually, you're not building strength, you're not building power, that's not building with their ability. So when you're coaching people or even like for yourself, what have been some of your methods to incorporate strength training to have longevity?
Yeah, I mean, I think number one, it's all about how you actually structure your training program. And very specifically, like what days you do what, that's key. Like, you don't want to train legs and then go do your speed workout the next day. Like, that's a terrible idea. So, keeping your hard days hard, keeping your easy days easy. And I think, it comes down to what you're doing in the gym. Obviously, like, we don't want to be ripping out 30 reps of random things at like 5-pound weights. It's not really going to do much. So I think finding that happy medium where you're not like going in and like trying to 3-rep max everything, but you're training intentionally. And I think like I always tell my clients, like, we're trying to train smart. So that means like really structuring your strength training program around your running so that you can recover optimally. You're ready for your hard sessions. You're going easy on your easy sessions and you're ready for those long ones. So I think it really just comes down to the actual like structure of your plan and the specific split that you have each week.
Do you guys have any books, podcasts, people, or anything that have been really big inspirations in your life?
you're like leaving so much on the table.
Yeah, I feel like I'm more of like an article person. Like, I love reading articles, like informational articles, here and there. And I'm not much of a podcast girl. But I don't know. I feel like I'm the type of person, like when I see something online, I'll be like, oh, what is that? And then I look it up. And then from there, I'm like, oh, what's that? So I'm like, I always feel like knowledge is power. Like, the more you know about something, the better off you are. So that's kind of what I do.
And so how do you take that and then go and implement that in real life? Because, I think knowledge, you're right, knowledge is power, but knowledge means nothing without information. So is there a balance like there between just taking in knowledge and then actually going and like, putting it into practice?
Yeah, I mean, I've always like been so like a huge advocate for intuitive training. You know, like someone can tell you like, oh, this works great for me, but that doesn't mean it's going to work great for you. And I think at the end of the day, like, you know, trial and error, obviously. But I think it comes down to intuitive training. Like if you feel like, and like even my clients, like if I, you know, give them a certain exercise in the gym, like barbell squats or deadlifts, you know, for some people, deadlifts really just don't work well with their body or it really hurts their back. It's like, okay, we don't have to program deadlifts however many times a week if that's just not something that works for you. And I think that's key. Like you have to kind of be intuitive with your body and understand like, okay, this, you know, this worked well and maybe this didn't. So let's make some adjustments here and there. So I'm a huge advocate for intuitive training and, you know, seeing what works and what doesn't.
No, I love that. That's amazing. So I actually want to go to the crowd here and we're going to do a couple Q&A. We have time for about 3 Q&As and then I'm going to ask you guys each the final question. So
how difficult is it for you to take on that mindset of just sort of accepting where you were in your current situation instead of like feeling down on yourself and your circumstances? Like how long did it take to get to that point, or were you kind of feeling that way like right as soon as you kind of got your bearings again?
yeah, so I mean, I collapsed on the track that one day, and I remember like starting the race, or not the race, the time trial, and I really don't remember much after that. And then the next thing I remember is just waking up in the hospital, you know, the next day, and I really couldn't really comprehend what was going on. And, like for the first day, I was on like a ton of medications that were keeping me alive, and when I really started to be able to digest what happened and everything, there was like a moment of like, wow, this is like a whole new chapter of my life. Like this is really going to be a rebirth. But I never had this victim mindset or this victim mentality just because it was out of my control. And, you know, one of my mentors gave me great advice a couple of years back when I first started, you know, creating content. And he told me like, Dom, when you face difficult things, you can either go through it or you can grow through it. And that just like immediately like rang true back in my head. And there was something that I kept repeating to myself. And it's definitely been frustrating at times. Like this weekend, I have a ton of FOMO because I can't go out and run, and I was supposed to be running CIM in December. But at the same time, I would have ran my body into the ground if this stuff, like I feel like it was God telling me to take a step back. You know, like, hey, I have a different plan for you, and you need to just like trust and surrender and know that this is all part of the plan. There's no coincidences. And I think of life as like a river that flows, and we're all connected, and like we're all, you know, we all source like energy from this river of life. And when you trust and surrender and just immerse yourself in the river and just let yourself flow, like then it really puts things into perspective. One, that like nothing in life really matters that much. You know, we put so much pressure on ourselves. We think about our next to-do list or getting to the next thing or just like getting through the day. When at the end of the day, it's like this is living right here, like being out in the mountains, like hanging out with amazing people. Like, so yes, it's been difficult in terms of like almost having to like reinvent myself from a creative standpoint, especially. I felt, you know, like all these people followed me for my running content, for my fitness content. Now I can't do that. Are people still gonna care what I have to say? But again, it's really just trusting and surrendering to the flow of life and just knowing that this is a season that I'm in, and I can either choose to feel bad about it for myself, or I can just accept it, control what I can control, and just find the bright spots in each and every day.
I know he's not very
All right. We got any other questions? Oh, we got one. There we go.
Hi, sorry I missed the beginning, so I don't know if you've covered this, but I was curious what you find to be the pros and cons of influencing as runners.
Okay. I think the pros, number one, I sometimes you don't even realize like how many people you can truly affect in a positive way. And I think sometimes even like when I'm having a bad day or something and I get like a message like, hey, thank you so much for this. Like you inspired me to like get my run in today or whatever it may be. Just simply by sharing your journey and being raw and real. So I think just being able to connect with people, do things like this, like I would have never been able to be here. It's honestly wild, like the connections that I've been able to make with other people, and just being able to share my story and people actually care about it. I think it's really cool. I do think, the cons, I think, comparison, I think, thinking like, oh, am I doing enough? Is this working? Like, they're doing great. I'm not doing good. I think comparison is huge. And even like, I think sometimes for me with training, like comparing my training to other people that I'm seeing. So, I think comparison can be huge, but at the end of the day, I think it's just so important to remind yourself like, hey, this is my journey and this is my content and I'm going to share what's authentic to me.
I would say the pros are similar to Caitlyn's. Like, it's just so cool. Like the people you're able to like interact with and encourage. And like, for me, that's like huge, like just getting to be a part of people's lives and their running and hopefully be a blessing to them in that way. The cons would be the trolls, the message boards. I mean, I've been to
months, via, Instagram, and now being able to sit up here live and do this podcast with them is just such a blessing. And, for me, like as a kid, when I started doing this, when I was 21 years old, a couple of years ago during the pandemic, like I had no idea what it was going to lead to. But when you just put yourself out there and seek discomfort and do what you feel is on your heart, like it will open up so many doors that you never thought would have ever come to fruition. So just the ability to connect with amazing people and have experiences like this.
Good question.
All right, so I know we got to start to wrap it up here, but one, I just want to say thank you guys for joining me today. For everybody here at Boulderthon, this has been so amazing. Thank you guys for organizing this. For everybody who stopped by to listen, this is amazing. I do have one question for each of you guys, and this is the Pure Ambition podcast. So I like to ask all of my guests, when you hear that phrase, pure ambition, what does it mean to you? And then how does it apply to your daily life?
Your ambition. I think for me, with my life, I don't know. I think I'm someone who's just very driven. Like I always want to do better every single day. And I feel like for me, like pure ambition is waking up every single day and saying like, okay, how can I improve myself? How can I, improve my career, my friendships, my business? And like, how can I just be a better person and what can make today better? So I don't know. I feel like that's what pure ambition means to me.
No, I love that. Thank you, Karen.
I love that. I think for me, it would be like living with a standard of excellence. So excellence is not just like staying at your level. It's continuing to push and try to excel at the next level. But like the pure part is like, you're doing this for the right reason. You're doing this with joy. You're doing this because it's like who you are, So, and that's how I try to live my life. Like always just continuing to like push to the next level, in whatever way I can. And it's not like every season is like a grinding season, but it's like holding yourself accountable to make sure that you're giving your best each season.
Thank you guys so much for tuning into today's episode. I wanted to give you all a heads up too that I launched a free community on the Upspace app where you can join, ask me questions, connect with like-minded individuals, follow my 4-week running and strength training program that has some dedicated mobility sessions in there as well, so that we can all optimize our health and fitness together. So if you're interested, head over to the App Store, download the Upspace app, and join the Pure Ambition community today. Love you guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.